Recently, a dear old friend of mine passed away. Joseph William Pelletterio died in his 95th year. Joe was a dairy farmer. He farmed with his brother George and wife Wilda on Asheville Farms near Milton, Ontario. I got to know Joe in the early 1960s. I ended up on the farm driving George and Wilda's son Larry home after missing the bus. Joe was out in the field hauling some hay, I believe, and I decided, well, I love farming, why don't I pitch in? Which I proceeded to do. When coming back to the house, what happens? Will, of course, invited me to stay for dinner. And I never left. For the next 10 years, I worked with Joe side by side. Early mornings to late evenings. Milking 35 milking cows, bringing in thousands of bales of hay and straw, oats for the cattle, seeding in the springtime, haying in the summer, harvesting in the fall. Joe was a simple guy, and I don't mean simple in a derogatory term. He had no special desires, never married, hardly ever left the farm. Only time he left to get a haircut now and again. And of course, to show his beloved cows at the Milton Fair, Royal Winter Fair, and at the Canadian National Exhibition. They had a wonderful operation. It was really, really the pride of Halton County. A prize Holstein herd that was the envy of many. Joe was small in stature, but had a huge heart. Kind of like to refer to him as a Spartan warrior, the strength and the serenity of a Benedictine monk. Joe made no demands on anything. Joe was one of those rare people in the world who played the hand he was dealt. Joe was a funny guy. He had his silly, goofy jokes that we all like to tell. Like, how do you get down off a horse? Oh, silly, you don't get down off a horse, you get down off a duck. That kind of stuff. And of course, he'd have everybody in stitches. And he'd go with his classical hee-hee-hee line after telling a joke. He was best, though, at goading his brother Jid, that was George, into telling jokes. Even after my stay on the farm, I'd come back for visits. The first thing Joe would say, Jid, did you tell Bill that one about the... And George would start telling jokes. And for hours at a time, we'd be rolling on the floor and laughing. George was a member of the school board in Halton County. And of course, every time he came back, he had new jokes. Now, none of these jokes, as far as I could tell, could ever be told near any school children. But boy, did we laugh. And I suspect, at one point, that he wasn't going to school board meetings at all. He was going to some kind of comedy school to learn all these jokes. Oh, I remember one time, it was in the summer, and I had shoulder-length hair and mutton chops and a big mustache and facial hair, so reminiscent of my hippie days in the 60s. And I was just pulling out the driveway, roaring down the road with a load of manure, and the milk truck transport came by, pulled into the farm to pick up his load. Well, when I came back, George and Joe were laughing, and George and Joe just couldn't wait to tell me that the milk truck driver wanted to know who the ugly milkmaid was with the facial hair. And of course, I have never lived that one down. But that's the kind of fun we used to have. Laugh and laugh and laugh until our stomachs were hurting. And of course, much sadness too at times, with losses of family members. Larry and Ann in particular. Joe was an extremely kind man. He loved his cattle. He loved his cows, Holsteins, those heifers. Boy, he looked after them with the care of a mother looking after her children. Everyone got a little bit of special stuff here or there, a little beet pulp, a little extra grain, a little extra second cut. That was Joe. He cared for those animals every day of his life. And he lived on the farm all but 6 years of his life. His last declining years he lived with Wilda in Milton. He loved these cows, Paula and Amy, Alice, Lyndon, and his most beloved cow of all, Lindy. When she passed away, a part of Joe died. Part of Joe, he was so attached to these girls who provided so much food for so many in this world under his care. He was kind. I remember one time a family of ducks arrived in the pond, and he was quite concerned that one of the predators, raccoon or so, would get him. So he built a little raft, tethered it to both shores. Well, for a few days there, the ducks would jump on the little raft, and they'd be fine and dandy. And one day, of course, they were all gone. Well, he'd forgotten about probably the snapping turtle in the pond. But we just pretended they grew feathers and got away. He had done his duty. He loved his gardens. He grew zucchinis big enough to ward off an army of conservatives. He was quite the gardener with that wonderful, well-rotted cow manure. Boy, oh boy, would that garlic grow. And he gave it to all who wanted some. One of the really funniest moments happened. We had a young lad, I believe his name was Brian, came to stay on the farm for a few days. Joe and I were working away in the calf barn, where the bull also resided, by the way, and he was pestering us. So Joe said, "You're going to quit that now. It's not necessary." And that was his favorite expression, not necessary. Brian kept doing what he was doing, so Joe and I just grabbed him, pulled his shirt over his head, turned him around a few times, and threw him in an empty calf pen across from Romeo, the 2,000-pound Holstein bull. Well, just as we did that, the bull let out a roar that shook the rafters and ran his horns along the grates of the pen. And, of course, poor Brian, running around the calf pen, not knowing where he was, figured this was the end. And Joe and I, just laughing. We couldn't believe it, the young lad. I think he behaved after that. Anyway, but that was Joe. Just a funny, great man. But he had a kindness in his heart that we could all learn from. 2005, I arrived at Jid's funeral in a little church in Palermo, St. Luke's. And coming from afar, I was just a little bit late. And I had to sit at the back, overcome with grief and sadness. As the family walked out of the church, Joe spotted me. He grabbed my arm and he said, "Come on." And we walked out of the church together to Jid's final resting place. That was Joe. Joe was a friend of mine. Rest in peace, my friend.